Hello ladies and gents, it's SumitoMedia, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 American Dad introduction speedruns. The American Dad speedrun has been one that's been growing in popularity over the last few weeks, despite the cold shoulder that it's received from the majority of the speedrunning community. This can be attributed to the fact that most people don't believe that you can speedrun through the introduction of an animated TV show. But they'd be blatantly wrong. Not only does American Dad have one of the most mechanically intense speedrun requirements of all time, but it's only been with a tremendous number of tool-assisted speedruns, RNG manipulation, sequence breaking, damage boosting, and multiple frame-perfect executions has the world record come anywhere near its current state. Thanks to the dedication of multiple world-class speedrunners, we've now been able to bring down the world record time to less than 1/3 of what it was just 6 weeks ago. So without further ado, let's hop into the top 5 American Dad speedruns. Coming in at number 5, we have a speedrunner by the name of Live who discovered a floor clip glitch that allows Stan to completely bypass the window segment and therefore saving almost 6.5 seconds over the original time. Now I have Live's run at number 5 because it's one of the most influential glitches discovered in the speedrun. Not only is this glitch used in almost every consecutive speedrun from this point on, including the world record speedrun, but it bypasses one of the most dangerous segments of the speedrun in its entirety, and that's the window segment. When we slow down the clip, we can see exactly what's done in order to perform this glitch. As soon as Stan gets out of bed and has his feet touch the shoes, we perform a frame-perfect double jump that not only has him stand up, but also store a small amount of energy that actually pushes him 2 pixels into the floor. Because of this, the game doesn't know where to put Stan, so he ends up getting pushed through the floor into what is below him, which happens to be the kitchen scene. Because he's now entered the kitchen scene, the game assumes that we've already passed the window sequence, and therefore equips Stan with both his suit, his tie, and his shoes, allowing you to continue the run and save the 7 seconds you would otherwise spend staring at the window. Now, before this floor glitch was discovered, speedrunners would use a much less consistent method. After getting out of bed like normal, you would make your way over to the window segment and do a wrong warp in order to teleport you to what's below you, very similar to the floor glitch. Except this time, you would be teleported to the front door of the house right below you and proceed with the newspaper segment right before jumping into the car. This method was abandoned pretty often because of the 50-50 nature of the wrong warp done at the window. In this situation, Stan is moving upwards as he's clipping into the corner of the window. So half the time it would clip Stan through the floor onto the front door of the house and then allow you to proceed normally. But the other half of the time, the upwards momentum of Stan jumping while moving away from the window would send you into the attic, which is not a textured location in the speedrun and would be considered an out-of-bounds skip, not allowed in any percent. Because of the nature of the window glitch, most runners decided to use the floor clipping method instead. It was much more consistent and wouldn't allow for your run to be disqualified. However, it wasn't without its own complications. On top of the fact that it's a frame-perfect double jump that needed to be executed right at the beginning of your run, it also required a number of things to go correctly, or the game could soft lock in one of many ways. If the double jump is performed too early, Stan will have too much momentum stepping into his shoes, sending him flying across the room and soft locking the game, as Stan has now broken both of his knees. In a similar manner, if the double jump is performed too late, the momentum that should be transferred to Stan sending him through the floor will instead be transferred to his shoes, exploding them, blowing open the floor beneath him and sending Stan through 2 floors, breaking both of his knees. Not only does this lose about 9.8 seconds on the initial segment, but you still have to go through the window segment, and the family never spawns in the kitchen because they're too busy calling an ambulance for Stan. Now, it is worth mentioning that some runners will purposefully use these glitches in order to die at the beginning of their run so that they can subsequently reload their save state to an already completed file, which would allow you to wrong warp and death abuse your way to the ending CIA cutscene, therefore completing your run. However, death warping in this manner does require an already completed save state, which would technically make this New Game Plus. So again, would not be viable for any percent. Coming in at number 4, we have a speed run by the user Frick, who manages to not only implement the floor glitch, but also discovers the glitch that we are now referring to as blank newspaper, saving a full 1.5 seconds as no text needs to be loaded on the newspaper when Stan picks it up, and then continues through the rest of the segment normally. User Cardboard explains how this glitch works in the comments of the same video. Essentially, you set the device time on whatever you happen to be playing on to 1:59 and 51 seconds in the morning, right before daylight savings. It turns out that the text on the newspaper is actually time dependent, and if you pick up the newspaper at the exact frame that the clock ticks over to daylight savings time, the game doesn't know what text to show on the front of the newspaper and instead shows nothing, saving a full 2 seconds over loading any sort of text otherwise. Now, while this was currently the fastest method for getting through this segment, it was extremely frustrating for speedrunners to have to meticulously reset their system clock to a particular time and date every single restart. Luckily, it was made obsolete almost immediately by user Pandas, who found a much more consistent method. Everything in American Dad is seen as an entity, and the newspaper and the text on top of the newspaper are spawned in as two separate entities, as the newspaper needs to be there when Stan opens the door, but the text doesn't spawn in until after the game knows what the date is. Pandas circumvents this by menu buffering as soon as Stan picks up the newspaper, overloading the game's memory. Because there is no more memory to spawn in anything else on top of it, they skip over the text that would otherwise spawn at that moment, saving the same amount of time. Using this method, Pandas was actually able to shave down the world record time to under 20 seconds, an amazing feat. Coming in at number 2, we have Joe%. Joe% is a special category in American Dad speedrunning, where you run the game on the Joe Swanson re-release rather than the OG title. This version allows you to play as Joe Swanson through the introduction, though most speedrunners choose not to do this because his lower voice causes the game to lag a little bit, despite the fact that it's running on newer hardware. As a result, most people play this on the original Stan Smith version and even run the game in English, as the Japanese version no longer saves you any time because we no longer load any text onto the newspaper. Coming in at number 1, we have the current any% world record by YoshiManiac on Twitter, who manages to save a solid 10 seconds over the most previous run, shaving down the world record time to 8.1 seconds total. I'm just going to let you enjoy this run before I say anything else.
Good morning, USA. Good morning, USA.
Watching this back frame by frame, we can see exactly how YoshiManiac was able to pull this off. Now, rather than doing just a single double jump as Stan enters his shoes in order to maintain enough speed to get through the floor, YoshiManiac does multiple consecutive frame-perfect double jumps in order to build up maximum P speed, so that Stan is now moving at the speed of the car that he would have been in. And instead of going through the floor, he directs all that momentum towards the window, sending Stan through the window of his bedroom, and then through the window of the front door, eventually around the block and ending up at the CIA office. Now, because he didn't enter any other part of the house or the neighborhood, this is not an out-of-bounds glitch because he's going through only the segments that are in the original run. Now, while this looks like the simplest of all of the different speedruns we've seen so far, it actually is the trickiest of all of the speedruns to be able to maneuver. Stan is moving so quickly. If YoshiManiac isn't able to control the direction at which Stan is going, he could clip too far, he could enter out of bounds areas, nullifying his run. People who had tried to use this speed boost manipulation prior had typically just ended up breaking Stan's neck as soon as he tried to get into the car. Naturally, people were skeptical about the legitimacy of this run. I mean, it almost doubled how quick you were able to finish this game using this skip. So whether or not it should be allowed was something everybody was up in arms about. Yoshi Maniac himself actually labeled this an out-of-bounds skip, though because he didn't access any restricted areas of the map or maps that were not intended to be accessed, he just went to the normal progression of the stages in an unnecessary or unexpected way. It is not an out-of-bounds skip. Rillick here on Twitter wanted to point out that this has to be an older ROM because on updated copies there's an invisible wall that prevents you from leaving the house without putting on your suit. However, this isn't relevant either because all speedruns of this game are run on this ROM, as later versions have different implementations to keep you from speedrunning them, such as the fact that Stan no longer enters the kitchen, says goodbye to everybody individually, and Roger shows up in the car so you can't skip the car sections. Nobody speedruns this version of the game. And that's about it. That's the top 5 most influential American Dad speedruns, and that's all I've got to say. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you guys want to see more speedrunning related content every week. And as always, I hope you have a beautiful life. Peace.